we are really excited about you guys joining us and this conversation. Carl and I have been good friends for a while, and it is truly my pleasure to know Carl. And I think the more I've known him, the more I've sort of like just been around him, I've realized how much, not only how good a human being he is, but also like how prolific his career has been, and within this world itself. He's really a wealth of knowledge, and it definitely doesn't hurt that he's a really good human being. So I think
Thank you.
so we're really fortunate that he's able to join us today. This is our first ever sidebar. Anybody who's on our newsletters would know what sidebars typically are about. They're generally just structured as raw, really simple, honest conversations about anything, any of those topics that bug all of us, right? I mean, or like just that we can't really figure out on our own in a silo. So this is a way to kind of get it out there, just talk it out, and have somebody guide us. And in this case, today is Carl, and then he'll shed some light on the ever-present topic of hiring. And especially in the we're going to be talking about in the creative industry as well, but that is the one that has really been the topic that has been most requested. All my calls, and I can't speak for Karl, but all my calls with mentees have been about primarily about hiring, and followed, if I were to kind of just bet something, I would say the next would be portfolios, and how to kind of just, and then networking also kind of just shows up. So maybe we'll touch on those today, but today's really about hiring, what is happening in the world of hiring, what is the status quo, and then how we may proceed to kind of just crack the code on this hiring. We're calling it decoding. So we'll hopefully decode it a little bit with Carl's help. But
Mhm.
yes, so that was my quick
Yeah.
spiel. So Carl, thank you for joining us.
No, thank you very much, Nitin. And it's interesting. And when Nitin had mentioned that we know each other for a while, uh, it's I'm thinking what, maybe 20 years on and off with
It has been
agency
that long.
contact.
Yep.
And the whole thing is that this is an important fact. The important fact is you need to stay in contact with the people that you consider good people. I consider you a good person as well, and also a really decent soccer player. So that's the challenge. So I think it's important that you stay in contact with people, and sometimes it's month to month, year after year. Networking is not just about going out and you know doing something at the moment. It's stay in contact with your core people that can help move you forward, in your endeavor, or even just to bounce ideas off of.
Right. Which is the original and organic way of networking, if you will, right?
Yes.
All right, so I think we have 30 minutes today for this call, just to kind of just level set. The first 15 20 minutes, Carl and I can just go over some structured content that we've been talking about that might be helpful to everybody to listen in and obviously process. But then at the end, 10 minutes or so, there will be a Q&A session. Towards when we approach that time, I will let everyone know to kind of drop their questions in the chat, and then we can take a few. Carl will obviously see some questions as well. We will see as well. So we can answer a few of those questions as much as time allows, and how quickly we go through these questions. We will see how we go. But that's pretty much the simple structure. Let's talk first, and then we can take on some questions. So with that said, Carl, I think it would be great to really understand where we are in space. Like, what is generally the status quo of creative hiring? What is something that you've seen is different from the years in the past? And in a nutshell, just at a high level, what is happening in terms of how people are hiring, and what their perceptions are in terms of like process, and anything that associated with it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Primarily, as we know, in let's say the last 5 years, which includes most of COVID, there have been lots of changes with the hiring process. The bottom line is within our creative industry, most of the positions that are available and open don't always reach standard platforms like LinkedIn. LinkedIn's important. We'll go into that a little bit later. But what I'm seeing as far as the process, I see a lot of frustration of people I talk to, also on some of the people that I mentor. The first thing I hear is they're sending out hundreds and hundreds of resumes and not getting any reply. So my response is, then maybe you want to don't apply that way. And it's important that within the scope of where people look for creatives, it could be connected through industry organizations, but I think the best thing to do is be proactive. And the proactive part is taking what you know from your kind of personal brand, all of your materials, and start looking for cultural fits, going directly, making sure that you're putting out the information that gets the attention. There is another gap, and you're going to hear all different things about ATS, which is applicant tracking systems, AI. But here's the key. The key is if you can't get to the hiring manager or the talent acquisition manager or the people in human resources looking for you, then it falls into an unknown black hole that it's hard to know if you even got your information to that person. So there are people getting hired. There's a definite trend to look at who is hiring. I see it all the time. It pops up on LinkedIn. I see alerts. People are getting hired at the senior level, mid level, and junior level. It's not just no one's hiring. I will also say because of the disruption of what's been going on now, we all know what the disruption is. You have to be very proactive and consistent when you're reaching out. So, when things change, you have to kind of change along with that process. And maybe it's not following a regular process. And we talked about networking. Sometimes you can't network. So then you have to figure, oh, maybe I should do something different. Maybe I should do some reach out. I had a person that was figuring out how they're going to get in front of the right art director. And they decided, well, maybe I'm going to go through a series of art directors I really admire and the work they do and the agencies and reach out to interview them for something that they're going to post later on LinkedIn so they have a little bit more presence. And they're still in the process of doing that. But interestingly enough, you're not asking for work. And then two of the art directors reached out and said, hey, why don't you send your resume over? So now you have that direct connection.
Yep.
And there's lots of ways that we need to keep the consistency and personal contacts front and center, not just I'm gonna just send this out on the internet or hope that someone notices on easy apply,
Yeah.
you know?
I think pretty we can make a safe bet here that people know that cold applying to like just an easy apply or like however they go to apply jobs, they know that the chances diminish that way. Not everyone has a personal connection to the role that they're looking at. Sometimes it is just like they need a job. They need to
Right.
they need a job, and they need it. Sometimes they're under the gun, especially with some of the South Asians or some of the other people who are actually immigrants working on visas, or they have they're an OPT. They have a different sort of like clock that's ticking for them. That is their case suddenly very quickly becomes very different from somebody else who doesn't have that case that hanging over their head, that acts right. So I think that's definitely the case. What's happening with AI? Is AI messing with the hiring process at all? Are
Well,
humans still looking at
well,
resumes or no?
I think that this is something that if you go further back in time, there's nothing new to the way applicant tracking systems will pull keywords out of resumes and then actualize who might line up uh, for the best position. There have been people reaching out to me, other platforms that says we can make your hiring platform easier. We can identify candidates. It's still using what I call aggregated data to pull information to identify, but we all know you can't really identify creative with AI. That's one key factor. Many creative directors will say, I need to see work that represents development. I need to see sketches. I need to see something. And this is where AI doesn't factor in. But I think because of what happens, there seems to be this, well, AI is taking over that as well, or it's going to
Yeah.
speed up the hiring process or to get people to pay. Someone reached out and said that I should join this new um, talent outreach AI platform, and it was going to cost me like $1,000 a month, and it was going to speed up my hiring process because it's going to take away, quote, the painful process of viewing resumes. And then I sent an email and said, hey, can you also help me review portfolios? And they said, well, we don't do that. We're just doing stuff on, they're just doing all the information off of a resume. So, if we don't, and I'm going to bring this into focus because whether you're doing interviews over Zoom, over, Google Meet or in person, you still have to be able to show your work. And it's a person, it's a people thing. It's a
Yeah.
it's a people thing that's I just think it's a matter of you have to be aware of what could come up in the dialogue because it seems like even if you're not talking about it through the hiring process, AI seems to filter into so many things, and then a lot of people don't fully understand usage and how it could affect them, you know?
Yeah. I think this sort of like, everybody creatives are starting to use AI in their work, in their creative work, right? So, but they don't know what is the role of AI behind this curtain of hiring, right? I mean, they don't know
Right.
how it's being used. Are they automatically being filtered out? Are they, is every shot shot at a job, shot in the dark? So, are there any like tips or like sort of like hacks, if you will? that we can get around. I mean, we all know this is a people's business, right? I mean, especially, if you're in advertising or if you're in design, if you work at a creative boutique shop or if you're like a network agency, I think regardless, right? I mean, networking, you already touched on that, is huge, right? I mean, how do you make a personal
Right.
connection when you don't know that person? That's a whole different topic. We
Sure.
know that, that's something else. But what are some of the things that they can do to kind of like shortcut this process or like expedite their way to get in front of who might be hiring for the role that they're
No,
applying?
that's great. That's a great point as well. And I think that again, what you hear and what we know, there are two different things. I've heard you need to create your resume in a Word document. It's got to look like this. And then I look at the resume and it looks like someone is in the corporate world and it doesn't look creative. So the myth behind ATS is that there are many platforms that you can throw what they call ATS readers that will actually look at your resume and tell you what percentage you scale up to on readability. So that's one factor. But the second factor is if your resume doesn't look like you're on the creative side, whether you're a designer, UX, UI, illustrator, you have to have a sense of type. You have to have a sense of content, context. It has to fall into the category. So the art director or creative director that's looking at your resume, not the ATS, is not looking at a straight off Word document in Times Roman that does not look creative. And I've had art directors
Yeah.
tell me if they can't work on a resume, it's your brand. It doesn't have to have something completely over the top. You do not want to Google, build me a creative resume online and see what pops up for images. It's pretty scary. You don't need a coffee stain on your resume. All these things that you hear, but again, you can throw your resume into applicant tracking systems to see if it reads. And if your resume is created in InDesign or Illustrator, Canva, Google Docs, and you make a PDF, it's going to be a readable document. The key factors here are if you do send your resume through LinkedIn, and to your point of not necessarily knowing, if you go on to this is a great little ethical hack. It's not, I can't really call it a hack. It's kind of like an inside secret. So if you did find someone on LinkedIn and it has just the key information as far as the LinkedIn URL, you can tap into Signal Hire, Hunter.io, or Rocket Reach. You don't need to pay anything. You can use the free version. And hit reveal, and it'll give you the direct email of that person's company. It's a standard protocol. So my best process is send a note saying, I thought we should be connected here, and I just sent you an email with my resume and website and open for opportunities. So if they get that at the same time, chances are they would reach out or they would see you. I have
So
some
you're
people say
saying
they
that,
don't, they're not on LinkedIn all the time.
yeah,
So they look at their email. So this is where you start to build now your kind of marketing outreach list of, oh, now I know it's, S winter at ogilvy.com. And then you might know that Ogilvy is all first initial dot last name, or it could be first name dot last name.
yeah.
Then, then once you get into this groove, you could also do one better and do the warmer introduction and find out, hey, do you know anybody in your network that knows someone at, HarperCollins or, Ogilvy or any one of the major places that you're targeting? And again, it's all about how you're presenting your work and then sending out something by email, sending something on LinkedIn, and then it's a consistency process over and over again. And it's
If you
not,
were to
I'm just
rank
going to do this one time.
if you were to rank stuff, in terms of like, if you sort of like wrap a candidate in like sort of like in a bubble, right? I mean, there's their resume, then there's body of work, right? And then
Right.
there's who do they know? I mean, is there a almost like, 1, 2, 3 in terms of like what's the at the top, what would be the most likeliest to get you that role? Is it who do you know, or is it your resume that people see first? What's most important? I mean, for me, the classic cliche is your work should speak for yourself, right? You could
Right.
have a crappy resume, but somebody opens your portfolio and be like, whoa, okay, that's cool, right? So that could just change things right immediately. So what's your POV on that?
Nope, that's it. No, that's it. That's a great point. I mean, I would say that right now, 90 to 95% of the people that are looking at creatives are going to be looking on their phone. So if you sent a brief note and included your images or your website, that would be mobile friendly, not something that's not mobile friendly, right? So if they're able to see that, and you need to kind of position this in a way that if it's a warm referral or if it's a cold outreach, then yeah, they would see your work first, but you'd want to say something to the effect of, and I kind of call this kind of the pitch approach, not a cover letter, maybe a couple short little paragraphs in your email to say, I really enjoyed this particular campaign, have been following your agency for a while. I'd like to set up a time, but here's some of my work. And then, of course, with the work they would see visually, they could click within your website and look at the resume.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's not just the resume, it's also how to get to the resume. And while I'm on that topic, if you were sending the resume, you have to make sure that everything on your resume is a live hyperlink. They should be able to touch on your name. You could put an invisible box in Acrobat. They can touch on the URL. In some cases, I had one person put an entire box around their entire resume. So as soon as you touched on the resume from the phone, it went right to their website. So that kind of worked really well because they're going to see the work right away, and
Yeah.
it's not going through multiple hoops. It's one point of contact.
So I know you've touched on the I think it's funny because even though we know the basics, the resumes can be a problem, right? Before it's a JPEG and turned in instead of live type, and it's like, the information's missing. The classic stuff is like really I think sometimes people just need to like get a handle on that, and then just make sure they're, even though their resume is just designed really in a basic format, I think it should be readable and all that. I think we always talk about, I think people should start looking at themselves as a sort of like a what is the personal brand that that
Right.
they might represent. Everyone is a storefront to an opportunity. Your personal brand, how you talk about yourself, how do people know about you, what they know about you, and how
Hmm. Hmm.
often do you sort of like make it known to the world what you're looking for, what you stand for? I think in obviously not to sound like as somebody from a previous generation, but I think we're so hyper connected that your touch points are dotted across the entire landscape. What you say, what you're looking for can easily be made known. And then I think how people know that about you, I think is key. That opens up a network that you may not be able to open up organically or even just like trying to connect with somebody. How many people do we have on our LinkedIn's that are actual connections, but we've never spoken to them?
Right.
We don't speak with them.
Right.
We just connect with them. Either we want them in our circle, or we love where they work, or they're in a position of hiring down the road. If you ever get there, there'll be a connection. But genuine connections take time, and then those can actually happen if the world knows about you, of what you want and what you stand for. So I think if we ever thought of ourselves as about our brand and the website, for lack of a better example, if it becomes our storefront, if you will, or our like sort of like what the brand looks like, everything has to be on point. I meet with mentees and I tell them all the time, I want to, when I come to your website, if I see work that really wows me, I'll stay. And if I'm sort of like introduced to who you are, make sure that's really pointed messaging of who you are, what you do, and what you're looking for. Just like a brief bio and then lead into the work. So I think the shift happened for me when I was also kind of just in that position of looking for opportunities like crazy. And I think it just realized, like, I think you just can't think of yourself as a candidate, right? I mean, you have to create a world for
Right.
yourself, and that world needs to translate wherever you go, socially or even in person.
No, that's a great point. And I think what I feel is most important is that you are a personal brand, but I think you need to be a resource. I think you also need to have a knowledge and understanding of our industry. So when I say a resource, if you are commenting on LinkedIn, and I know there's a fair amount of people that are on this video, or we know, uh, they will contact someone, but then they'll also comment on other things happening in our industry. But if someone comes to us as our brand, we need to look at this as customer service meets what I call subtle networking. If someone says, "Hey, do you happen to know this?" I mean, we recommend restaurants all the time to people, or "Hey, you're traveling, go here." I think it's better if someone acts as that resource where they might pass on if the client needs a writer or they need a printer. If you're a resource, they will come to you as a good person that would say, "Oh, this person might know where," because personal recommendations seem to still rise,
Yeah.
right? It's not like we're not like putting you know, a comment on Yelp or putting a review out. Um, it's important. Referrals are important. We know that referrals are important because that's that's what makes that connection stronger.
So if somebody's really stuck and they've sent out 835 applications and they've heard maybe from four, but they somehow haven't moved all the way across the finish line. What I think maybe you can recommend a few things that they should or should not do. I know you and I were touching on this, and you said, like, being very intentional about what to even apply for. Maybe you're applying for too much. So any of those tips and tricks for them that they can just start being more effective in their strategies. That would be great.
Yeah, I think if they sent out that many resumes, applications, that is a that's extreme. And if they haven't heard back, then I would go and look at, okay, why didn't this work? Who did I reach out to? If it was half of those outreach situations where it was easy apply, that's one major factor. I think it's best to seek out culture. people that work within agencies, design firms to see how it would be a really good fit. And then again, it's still direct outreach or come up with another plan of, hey, I'm going to be in New York. Um, I know it used to be easy where we could almost drop in and see people. I know that there's been creatives that have done direct mail pieces, uh, blind direct mail, where they just say, this is the kind of work I do. But I really think the way this has to be tied together is figuring out the 3 or 4 channels that work best. So making sure that everything is consistent on your website, your resume, and then start to build a presence on LinkedIn, Medium, replicate your website, and maybe put up a Behance website because lots of people will comment there. It's kind of a little bit more of a collective, like a shopping mall. And there has to be engagement. There has to be engagement and there has to be um, conversations or making comments and making sure that you tag yourself, the person you're talking to. And this has to be built up over time. I also think that many people that are working in design are not as visible or they're not promoting themselves through the design organizations or showing up. And I know that another topic that is a whole area of, hey, should I enter work into these award shows? It can get very, very pricey. Well, sometimes it's worth it. Other times it's not. But I think that there are certain award shows that might give you more visibility. You might put something in the unpublished category for communication arts or graphice. It's not going to be a ton of money, but again, when Dina was talking at my class yesterday, she said, "Hey, I spent $1,000 on marketing, which meant $1,000 on entering shows." And yes, she did win a gold medal, but she said, that's not why I do it. I do it for visibility and cross-pollinating with social channels. I think people forget that many companies and other creatives will look on someone's website, then they'll go to a social channel to see, other work. It's not just, hey, I'm using social just for personal. It should be used for business and for your personal brand.
Yeah. When you're having fun, you don't know where the time flies, which is the case with us today. We're coming up on, we want to be sensitive to every time. We were also coming
Yes.
up with them. But I think what I want to do is allow everybody to drop in some questions for Carl. So Carl does mentorship as well on his own, and some of you may have known him personally, or you had those sessions with him. But if you're stuck somewhere, and if you really, if you think that there's something that you can't figure out, or something that Carl said today didn't make sense to you, or you want to like double click on, you guys can drop in a question in the chat and we can see it. Anybody is welcome to speak up, go on unmute, be off on video, whatever you want. This is an open format, if anybody has a question, I will happy to unmute on them and they can show up on video as well. But while we wait for the questions, if anybody has any questions, I think the one thing that I don't I hear from a lot of mentees when they call and when I have the conversations with them is what is the mindset? I always try to like figure out the mindset of somebody who's on a work visa, right? They're here. They're here on a time clock. Their clock is ticking. There's a psychological aspect that a lot of us can't really relate to on a one-to-one basis. So they're going through a whole different set of issues that
Yes.
some of the others aren't. And I know you teach at SVA, and I'm sure there's a lot of international students there. What do they talk about? Are they, when they're about to graduate, are they nervous? And what do you tell them?
No, that's another part of this that I see on a regular basis. And um, different programs within a variety of schools have a different timeline. And that's something that it's very difficult. in this marketplace to be looking when it comes to having a little bit more of a, hey, this is going to start in June, or I need to secure something within this time frame. Yes, that does put undue pressure. I think it's best to be very straightforward with potential employers, figuring out a way to kind of diffuse a little bit of the mystery. A lot of people don't understand sponsorship. The more that you know, the better it could be for a possible employer. And a lot of times, sponsorship is not that complex. But if the client thinks it is, then they may or may not pursue someone. And in this marketplace, it's just a matter of being very positive and saying, well, I can share in some of the expenses if there are some, giving them other information, or finding companies that have what I call a multicultural fit of having more than one presence, whether it's here or someplace else in the world.
Do you recommend being upfront about that? Because I know some people wait till the end because they're not
Um,
sure if that's going to hamper their opportunity and they just wait at the end. I know
yeah,
people.
I,
No.
I've I've heard both. Sorry, I have heard both parts of this, where that's been a question. I think it's better to be upfront with salary requirements, working environments, and whatever it takes for visa. And it could be any number of things because I've had people from other parts of the world. One of my creatives that I placed on a freelance basis needed to have sponsorship, but she was originally from France and she was here for 10 years. And it took literally 12 months to get everything squared away, but the company was very good about it. And you have to be kind of upfront. You can't wait to the end. I don't think it's a good thing to wait to the end, you know?
Yeah. Um, Mary had a question. Uh, what advice would you give to the person who made it to the interview stage? How should they handle the interview?
You mean as far as, are they having an interview in person or are they having an interview over video?
Let me see if I can bring uh video call. Okay. Video.
If you've made it to the stage of video, I still think if we put the whole interview process into a conversation, you should be having a conversation, but best circumstances, you should be interviewing the employer to see if there's a good connection. Um, Keep in mind that there are employers that have people in place to interview for any number of reasons. It could be from the human resources side or it could be from the creative side. So this is where the conversation needs to have a familiarity. It's the same thing with client engagement. I mean, I recently had a client call. It was a referral from someone I worked with about 8 years ago. And the first 15 minutes was a familiarity of, we were just talking about different things. It wasn't the client interviewing me to see how placement was going to happen.
Yeah,
So,
the interview
and
process is tricky because, in the sense that I think your best bet is to make sure that you know everything. Hopefully, you've applied there because you're really jazzed about what they do.
right. Yes, that's the research aspect of this has as much importance, and you should know what the company is all about, the person that is interviewing you, or possibly more than one person, knowing what they do now, what they did prior, why there's of interest, and you should always, this is kind of a common thing, but always keep a couple questions in reserve. Don't answer, um, if they say, do you have any other questions? Don't answer no. Just say, I do have a couple other questions about, again, this depends on what they ask about. It could be about the agency, it could be about work-life balance, or tell me something really interesting that happened with one of your clients. I mean, there's got to be a couple. I usually say put 4 or 5 questions in reserve that you might, and have a notepad. I mean, I have a notepad in front of me like literally every time I talk to someone, so at least I can refer to my notes. If you write it down, it could be just simple bullets.
I think they're obviously all great points, and I think the only thing I might add there is, the interview. I was in an interview process, like last year, I mean, a couple of years ago. It was a giant corporation. We're talking billions of dollars in revenue, and I made that I prefaced that in my post, and they will ask you all sorts of things. A good fit would try to know as much about you
Right.
as well as your work. So
Yes.
they would hire you for who you are. And I have to say, if I were to kind of just, you know, uh, go on a limb and say that I think the thing that stands a little bit different for people who are from other countries who are like thousands of miles away from home. They have a very different backdrop they're coming from. Their background, their culture, their story is unique and it's very
Hmm.
different. Everybody's story is unique to them. But what is, really your ammo is your story. Your story is what sets you apart from everyone else. And coming from a completely different culture with a completely different set of sensibilities is really your ammo. So definitely lean into that. No matter where you go, if your resume, your website, whatever it is, let your story be what sells you and sets you apart. No
No,
one
that's
will ever
no,
come close to that.
that I think um, the cultural difference is kind of your unique selling proposition. And I want to use it as a selling proposition, but it's it gives you a different view on the world. It gives you a different view when dealing with um, design, the visual aspects, and I think it adds to the cultural mix within the company agency. I see that Paula has a about age
Yeah, I think
discrimination.
that's a good one to. I think we have 4 minutes. You should take that one. And in the meantime, actually gonna drop your details too, Carl, for anybody who wants to circle back with you.
Sure,
But I
sure,
think
thank you.
maybe we can make that one as the last one for this one at least.
Yeah, I think with age, this has always been a tricky set of circumstances, but the key elements are, unless it's completely overt, then I believe it's better to just lean into the experience of what you have. And if a client is looking to hire someone with experience, we've all seen the job postings looking for a creative director needs 5 years experience. That's not really what it means because we know a creative director can't have just 5 years. So I think that it's hard to define um, age as a, there is going to be some differences. I would have to be able to speak to you directly if there was something specific, which I'm happy to talk to you offline about. It's a it's a topic that comes up a fair amount. It's in our industry, I think we have a lot more latitude than in certain circumstances, certain corporate environments.
Yeah, and I just dropped in a quick little note. Everybody, if you want, you can drop your. This is a means to connect with people you may not know. So if you want to drop your websites or your details here, so we can all sort of like connect later, be it on LinkedIn or Instagram or wherever you fly most. I think this, the broader this community gets, the stronger they become. I believe that. And again, if you're comfortable doing that, so you should do that. I would say that I think that's great advice. Age is always very tricky. There are perceptions around age, and there's all this talk about creative industry has a short shelf life. Everybody, who's in their mid careers, be it in their late 30s or 40s or whatever that number may be. And then there's the rising stars, the Gen Zs, and then the all. I think there's a little bit of that perception that everybody wants to hire a Gen Z now because they know
Right.
the social landscape better than. I think that's true, but what is also true is that the mid-career person knows how to navigate simple things like a brief or a creative or how to run a project or how to work with. They have more experience dealing with people and stakeholders within an organization. That experience is invaluable and it can only be accrued over time. So there's no shortcut to that, and I think you should really take pride in that and your experience and really let that shine. I know we are running at time right now. I do want to thank Carl for sparing the time. This was our first ever, foray into sidebars and convos. We'll do one every month, so that'll come. But the best way to kind of be in touch with, and they're always going to be all different kinds of topics. So I encourage you guys to follow us and to stay in touch with when we announce any of those conversations, with creative directors, any topics around visas, immigrants, immigration statuses, everything, right? I mean, I think there's going to be a whole slew of these conversations that are going to be on a monthly basis. So I hope you guys stay in touch with us. And if you guys are all set, we will say goodbye to you. And it was great seeing you all. Saw some familiar names today here. Thank you all for joining. Stay in touch. Email Carl if you have any questions. You have his website. And, obviously he has coaching services as well that you can take advantage of, which I wish I was way younger and I would need coaching when I was graduating, Carl. And yeah, I saw you right now. I would probably like avail of that. But I'm sure those are really valuable for everybody.
No, and thank you for setting up this platform. And I am so pleased to be part of this and will continue to be part of this because I think these conversations and our knowledge and all the people that work connected through the industry, we need to have these open dialogues for the reality checks, not just what becomes out over the internet and thinking that everything that we see is either real or not real. So I think what you're building is tremendous. Hopefully, with some other uh, pieces of either events or online, we can make this grow, and it would be valuable for anybody of really any culture. I look at it this way: there's so much talent where you're looking in the categories that we were talking about last week. It's like, wow, the work that's coming out in from certain people is amazing.
Yep, I agree. Thank you so much. Appreciate the compliments, and we will sign off. Thank you for joining again, Carl. It
You
was
got it.
awesome talking, and
My
thank you
pleasure.
everyone for joining. Have a great weekend. Have a good rest of your Friday,
You
and we'll
too.
see you guys in a month or so.
Okay. See ya.
Yep.
Bye.